Augustine concedes nothing to the unaided human will. Grace does all. Listen now to Augustine's words, so that today's Pelagians, the Sorbonne sophists, cannot accuse us, as they habitually do, of having all the early fathers against us. Here indeed they follow their father Pelagius, who pursued Augustine with the same slanderous claim. Augustine treated the issue at length in the work entitled On Rebuke and Grace, parts of which I will briefly cite in the author's own words. He states that the grace to persevere in goodness was given to Adam, had he willed to employ it. That it has been given to us so that we might will, and that in willing we might overcome our evil appetites. Adam possessed the ability, had he willed to use it, but the will was not there, nor therefore the power. To us both the will and the ability are given. Whereas man's original freedom was to be able not to sin, the freedom which we now have is much greater, not to be able to sin. The Sorbonnists take that to mean the perfection which awaits us in the future life. That, however, is nonsense, for Augustine goes on to say that among believers the will is so guided by the Holy Spirit that they are able to do the good because they will it, and that they will it because God produces the will in them. For if, he writes, amid such weakness, enough will remained for them to do good with God's help if they chose to, and if amid so many trials God did not give them the will, their feeble will would fail, and they would not be able to persevere. God has thus come to the aid of man's frail will, directing it so that it cannot be bent this way or that, and overruling it so that it cannot turn aside. Consequently, infirm though the will is, it cannot give way. Augustine subsequently shows how our hearts are bound to follow God's leading when he draws them, insisting that God draws men in accordance with their will, not forcibly, but that their wills are those which God himself has formed in them. Thus, with his own lips, Augustine endorses the central argument which we have been pursuing. Grace is not something which God offers and invites us to accept or reject, just as we please. It is grace alone which causes our hearts to follow God's prompting, and which allows them so to choose and to will that all the good works which follow are the fruits of grace, which no man living can receive unless it has trained his heart to obedience. Therefore, the same Father elsewhere declares that any good we do is solely the work of God's grace. In yet another place he states that grace does not destroy the will, but changes it from bad to good, and that once it has been made good, it receives help. By this he means only that God does not push man by outward force, unfeeling, as if he were a stone, but that he is impelled in such a way that he willingly obeys. Moreover, in a letter to Boniface, he says that grace is specially given to the elect as a free gift. We know, he writes, that God's grace is not given to all, and that when it is given to someone, it is not according to the merits of his will, but according to God's free favor. When it is withheld, it is because of God's righteous judgment. And in the same letter, he firmly and forcefully condemns those who regard subsequent grace as a reward for the merits of those who, by not rejecting initial grace, have proved worthy of the other. Thus, Augustine presses Pelagius to admit that grace is needed for each and every work, and must be seen not as a recompense for merit, but purely and simply as grace. For a rapid review of this question, we can do no better than go to the 8th chapter of Augustine's On Rebuke and Grace. There he teaches first that the human will does not obtain grace through its own freedom, but that it obtains freedom through God's grace. Second, by grace also the will is confirmed in goodness, that it might love and persevere in it. Third, it is fortified by an invincible power to resist evil. Fourth, if ruled by this power, it never falters, but if abandoned, it immediately stumbles. Again, he says that through God's free mercy, the will is turned to goodness, and that when turned, it perseveres in it. Or again, when man's will is led and directed toward goodness, and is confirmed in it, it is due to God's will alone, and not to any merit. Thus, the only free will left to man is that which Augustine describes in another place. Man cannot turn to God nor remain in him except by his grace. All that man is able to do is done by grace.